to the Kennedy Events Podcast, where we feature top marketing, communications, and future of work leaders and share their biggest takeaways and insights. We love these conversations and hope you will too. Let's get started.
Hi, and welcome to the Kennedy Events Podcast. I'm your host, Paige Buck. Past guests include Dave Ferris of EPMC, Tommy Halverson of Hospitality Group, and Katie Miller of Patina Pictures. And today I'm talking with Hwang, an internationally ranked pinball player, first and foremost, award-winning Polaroid shooter, and the co-founder of Orange Photography, the San Francisco Bay Area's premier corporate photography agency, servicing large corporations and organizations across the United States. Before we get started, today's episode is brought to you by Kennedy Events. Kennedy Events creates stress-free conferences and events, providing expert management and design for all your corporate event needs, from in-person to hybrid and virtual. And you can learn more about us at kennedyevents.com. So hi, Gene. Thanks for being here.
Hello. How's it going, Paige?
It's going great. I think you and I have known each other for more years than I want to say out loud. But from the very origins of your company, so I've watched you grow, but I'd love to hear you describe what that trajectory looked like, how you got started, what the idea looked like, and what you, at the time, what you imagined the growth trajectory of the business might look like.
Yeah, so we started in 2001. It was three of us. It was Jack Wynn, who's currently still my business partner, and also Andy Barry, who he spun off a few years out. And Andy and Jack were talking about the idea. Jack was my roommate at the time, because the kind of tech boom, the first tech boom had just kind of bust. This was right at 2000, 2001. And so a lot of people were out of work, and they were kind of talking about ideas on, what could they do? And I still somehow had my tech job in tech. It was worked on the agency side, but they were talking about doing photography because we knew digital was where everything was moving. And in 2001, the digital cameras, the pro level stuff wasn't super good. The first cameras we bought were 3 megapixels. So your iPhone is this is 12 or something megapixels. So it's already much higher res than the pro cameras at the time. And so they were kind of banding about the idea of maybe we can do this event photography thing because, or weddings or events and both. And I would kind of shoot little holes into their ideas when they were talking. And eventually it came out, it was like, okay, this seems like a good idea. We can go do everything digital, which is, I think, the way of the future. Then we don't need to have a lab and all these processing costs and chemicals that are harmful for the environment, all this stuff. So we were talking about it, and we said, let's just do this. And we were kind of strategizing, how do we do this? We had some experience in photography. Andy actually went to CCAC, as it was called back in the day. I had been doing freelance photography on the side kind of, and Jack actually didn't know much photography, but he was going on a vacation to Vietnam and Southeast Asia and just asked for some tips on how to use a camera, and came back and he had the best eye of all of us. And we're just like, okay, yeah, you just have this magical skill. So we decided to do events and weddings to start off with because we didn't need to have a studio or anything. And we kind of strategized, we're like, how do we get into this world that we don't really know that well? And so we looked at the organizations. There's a lot of industry groups here that are really great. And I think we're very fortunate in the Bay Area to have really strong chapters of some of these, these organizations. So we joined a couple of those. We also did some events for nonprofits, for fundraisers, where we would just kind of donate our services because people didn't know who we were. And so that's kind of how we got started. And it was also hard kind of coming up with a name because we weren't sure what to call ourselves, because most photography studios are led by a single photographer. So it's that person's name. And then, the three of us were like Wynn, Hwang, and Barry, which sounds like an injury lawyer firm or something, so we were like, that doesn't sound good. And it was like Gene, Jack, and Andy sounds like a, auto parts store or something. So we were kind of coming around, kind of seeing what would be a good name. And we liked the color orange. Jack actually, I think, already had bought Orange Photography because back then the domain names you could still get
that was the thing. I better get this domain, and it better be the full business name. Yeah,
you don't want the .net or something, or all that. Mm-hmm. Now there's better ones, but back then, so yeah, we had it. We were like, Orange Photography could work because the Golden Gate Bridge is international orange. The Giants are like orange and black, so it's kind of a very colorful color that means something to San Francisco. It's a word that doesn't have a lot of words that rhyme with it, unlike Jack and I's last names, which are hard to pronounce and spell. And also it means, it's a food and a color. It's kind of, a lot of creative businesses seem to have, it's a bright color. So we really liked that name. And so it kind of worked. And then we just went out there and started doing it. I don't know that we did have a plan kind of because for how the company might grow. And it's actually because we did write a business plan when trying to get a loan, get started. And we did actually have the plan of what we kind of are today, which is more of a kind of an agency model where we work with photographers because, we have kind of a core team and then we bring in talent depending on where the jobs are and what kind of talent is required. And so, even though that was very, very early, it kind of is true to what we are now. We had to kind of adjust during the pandemic and because, I think everybody did. And so it's kind of been tweaked a little bit, but also we're a lot older than we were when we started because that was 2001. So it's been 23 years. So, we've kind of doubled in age or more. And
Right. Well, it's a helpful reminder, I think, to think about how technology has changed, even how our business decisions have changed, what seemed like incredibly, I don't know, risky and forward thinking, pure digital, no print, because you're reminding me that when we met, I was in one of those, like lightly affiliated, both nonprofits and industry associations, the Chamber of Commerce. So it was like a foot in the door and a way to promote yourself, I'm sure, to the business community and get your name out there.
Yeah.
But also my immediate predecessor kept printed photos and negatives in binders, like in plastic sleeves that we would flip through. And I probably still ordered prints of some of the best images afterwards for what, I don't know, posterity. But so it was a real time, like moment of change, right in the early aughts.
Yeah, like I don't know if you went to college and they had like party pics for things where like literally you'd have to order prints, and it was kind of, it's weird. I don't know what like school, because like there's the whole industry of school photography and youth sports and all that stuff used to be prints too. And or like your graduation thing that they would mail you the little photos.
Yeah. I have photos from like semi-formal dances from college, but now I think like the only prints that I think of like that are like my nephew's little school shots. So for sure.
But it is nice. I really do like the tangibility of like printed stuff. And we mostly don't have any of that nowadays. Everybody's got everything on the phone, but that's why I kind of like doing for myself. And I try to promote it. Sometimes we've actually been successful doing printed stuff. There's like photo booth stuff where it's printed. But one time I got a client for a couple of years to do a super VIP event where we actually shot Polaroids, which was nice because people don't get Polaroids anymore. And it's kind of novel sort of that you get something real, like, it's nice. I just have some from this weekend where it's just like, there's actual photos that people have. It's a one-off. And then we don't have to do any work on the back end for that as well. So that was kind of a selfish.
Sounds like what resonates for people. And you mentioned photo booths. Like people love like novel, lightweight ephemera. It's even more special now that we don't get prints of every single event that we attend or every major life moment, right? Those, like you said, those live on our phone. Are there other ways you've seen things like that shift in the, how many years now that you've been in business? 22?
Yeah, 22. Yeah. Like that's the thing that's interesting because like the people like the photo booths and photos printed of any sort because it's a real thing. The nice thing, most of the photo booth printing or photo event printing, there's kind of levels of this they vary, but I really, I like it if it's a traditional photo, like a Polaroid type thing, but this isn't really practical for the most part where, the digital printing is pretty nice and it works really well. But there have been different things that like they've had I've seen like some of the photo booth companies do like the kind of animated ones that you kind of tilt and they kind of animate, which are neat. And there was one 3D printing kind of it would make a little model of you. Wow. That I've seen, but it hasn't taken off. I thought it would take off because that's kind of neat. You basically kind of get a little action figure of yourself, and it just does I think it might just be that the 3D printing technology isn't fast enough to make them like, in a reasonable amount of time, but at some like super high end, kind of private events where there's much smaller guest list and it's something there's a formal dinner, sit down, you can kind of do it up front and then have them
Pick it up on your way out the door. Yep.
Yeah.
Those are great. What do you find? I mean, since you've been in this for some time and it came out of this like idea you bandied about for a while, what do you still find fulfilling? What gets you out of bed in the morning to go to work at Orange every day?
Well, I mean, I love events, and I think probably for yourself, the fun thing about events is they're real. They're these, they're like this real thing happening, not like we're on Zoom. This is fine for this, but but I really don't like being on Zoom meetings for like work meeting type things. And I know we're very fortunate. I think we don't have to do it as much as people that have kind of a, a desk job type thing or a tech, kind of thing where they do that or they're working remote. And being live in person is really great. Just like I meet lots of different people. And, I think this is the other thing. People think maybe you're a photographer, you're always photographing, but you're not, like actually like doing sales, marketing, just interacting with clients on the computer to kind of, before the events, that's a lot more of the actual work. But I love that part. And I also love being on site at the events. Because I have access to so many different types of things that I probably wouldn't ever have. And sometimes I have no idea what's going on, like a medical conference, they might be talking about things I really don't understand. But a lot of times you might get a keynote that's a very interesting person. We just had an interesting one where the keynote speaker is a person who does poetry, and he had his promo image, and it was shot by us, by somebody on our team, and he didn't know that we were coming, and so it was kind of neat to meet someone that was actually using some of our images for their marketing. But
that's
yeah,
rewarding to see that. You're like, oh, that's us actually. Quite proud.
Yeah. But I really enjoy, I do a lot of the travel jobs from the destinations, and like the, incentive programs are always fun just because the crowd is very relaxed and having a great time, and it's usually in somewhere fun. But even the user conferences, the sales kickoffs, just the general conferences are pretty interesting because I can always learn something. Although when I'm photographing, it's a little hard to listen because I'm kind of focused on what I'm doing. So a lot of times I can't actually hear what's going on in the sense of like paying attention, because I'm being very superficial and just being like, I want to make this look interesting more than understanding what they're talking about. So I sometimes someone's like, oh, what did they say? And I'm like, I don't know too much because I couldn't like listen into them as much. But
you've been in here the whole time. Why haven't you?
Exactly.
Taken all of that in. What stands out to you? Like when you, I mean, to the extent that you can pick up on this, because you're not just trying to find the sweetest shot. What stands out to you about what sets like a, everyday event apart from something that really is meaningful to the participants?
There's like a few things, obviously just like things running very well and professionally, like I think when you're in events industry, you look for maybe the smaller things, because at a certain level, the big things should be taken care of. And then the more fine details are the things that really make something, run smoother or be more of a great experience. And like the one little thing that's like my little weird pet peeve, which doesn't really apply to me, but when I see it, is when they have like buffet style meal situations, but they push it against the wall when it could be, you could go on both sides. I'm like, this is
could be double-sided and twice as fast. Yep.
Yeah. And I've seen them, sometimes they have it for the vendor meals where like they only have the utensils on one half, but it is a two-sided thing. And you're like, this is not very,
Yes.
But I mean, what I like selfishly is good lighting, because lighting, really helps. And some of that's a venues just have some stuff built in, but it depends on the level. I understand, there's budgets and there's lots of things to account for, and that's not always the most important thing for the attendees. But a lot of times having decent lighting for a speaker is kind of important, because I've been to places that have really bad lighting. That's when you really notice it. And same with sound, which doesn't matter for the photography, but for the event, it's important that the people can hear and things. So those kind of things are things that I kind of notice, but also just kind of, there's a vibe that certain, groups that we work with, they're just so on top of it, and we know everything's going to be good. Like, when you have a certain client, you're like, okay, this is going to be great. And that's always nice to know that you're like working with, we're all professionals, but Some people I think they think on the level of the production as it is for the attendees, but also what's going to work for all the rest of us that have little roles to do. And I think, the top level folks can kind of also accommodate all those things or have them in mind up front so that they can make sure it works for every level, because, like the photos are important. That's why they're paying us to shoot them, because they need them for marketing or whatever else. So, if they can get good assets as well as a great experience for the attendees, that's really key,
Yeah. Are there some folks in the industry that stand out to you as like, when they hire me, I know that it's going to go smoothly on site. It's going to be easy.
Well, we love working with you, of course.
I wasn't looking for a pat on the back at all.
I figured, yeah. Well, I just had a
curious.
recent one with the event studio, and we really like working with them. They're fantastic. I just came back from that. And
Nice.
then one of the bigger companies that we kind of work in layers, because they do a lot of really huge events, and we work through Eventrix sometimes, but also I4D. But like a lot of times there's so many vendors involved. What's that?
What is, you said I4D? What is
I4D? They're out of Chicago, and they produce a lot of large tech-based conferences that are usually just in various locations, and they do some incentive programs for the same companies. But
really large show producers.
Yeah.
There's so many. I mean, that's the other thing. Almost every day I'll have a conversation with a client or a vendor, and they'll say, so do you know so-and-so who, like, we're also talking to them, or do you know so-and-so because we used to work with them? I'm like, there are so many of us, so many
Yep.
really awesome ones, and so many you could just pass right by and think very little of.
Yeah.
They might have a skill we haven't had a chance to, see them exhibit. That's great. Do you think that in general, folks do a good job of considering like what their vendors' needs are on site?
I mean, I think it's more based on the level of the event, because sometimes you have events that are kind of planned from somebody internal because it's a smaller event. And so they just have some internal person that's kind of overseeing it. And they're often, I think, they get a lot more on I think they realize the value of having professional planners when their scope of their event is maybe a little bit above where their experience is, but they're doing it for whatever reason. Maybe they didn't have the budget to hire someone externally, and they're just like, they're like, you need to take care of this. And sometimes in those events, the things because when you're in this enough, all the little things that make the differences, and then they don't have those things accounted for, and that might be a budget thing too. They're like, listen, we can't light up the stage, or it's going to be in this room because it has to be in whatever else. So I do notice that there's definitely kind of levels, and some of it's based on budget, because you feel bad if someone just doesn't have a budget, and they're locked into this particular venue that they have to use. Maybe it's because it's a university event, they have to do it on their own campus, and it's not super ideal, versus, oh, we've got great production, we got a whole lighting team, we got everything. That's always better. But I understand that it's not, and I like the challenge. That's why I like doing events, because sometimes you have great setups, sometimes it's super not ideal, and it's just like, it keeps the creative juices just from this perspective of like, okay, how am I going to make this look good, because we want it to look good. And sometimes that's one thing with the like higher versus lower level budget. I was just doing an event in Orlando last week, and they had like keynotes that were in the big fancy areas, lots of breakouts, and some smaller ones that were just in different lighting situations, and so
Yes.
I could shoot from the side on the keynote stage, and everything looks good on the side because it's kind of wraps around a little bit, where if I want to get a side angle on a speaker in another room, you might see just the air walls of the conference center or something, which isn't as ideal. Yeah.
That does not make a good background. So you're basically saying, if you have to shoot at different levels, you can't get complacent. You're never going to get too comfortable in your job. You have to.
Yeah, which is good. I know some of my friends who do event photography don't appreciate the challenging situations as much, because it does make it harder sometimes to get what the clients want. But it's kind of fun, but it's also can be a little frustrating when it's super dark or something, and and just really, really hard to get the best shots of things. So
when you have a really great client or a really great agency relationship, do you come to them with those things? Do they give you a chance to articulate pre-event what would help you make it even better?
Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. I think it just depends on what it is and where they're going to be and everything. And but I usually will, if only when it's really, really bad or / challenging, I'll say some stuff up front. Maybe, we always just to let them know that this might be really tough if you want to do it this way, because you know how it is. Sometimes a client wants to change things, and like the plan was this the whole time, and suddenly it's not, and they want to do something different, and so they have to adjust. And then it's like, well, this whole thing was built to be this way, and now it's not because you want to change it, which is fine, but it's going to be, so we let them know, especially when it's that kind of thing where the client is changing it last second, because we're like, okay, this is going to impact, they're going to be standing behind a super bright window instead of on the stage or whatever it is. So it's going to make the images not as great for this or that. Or like if a lot of times there's these last second group shots because the client's like, oh, everybody's here, let's do this. And we're like, oh, this is like really not a good area to do this in. Or,
yes,
they want like 50 people with no risers or no kind of elevation where, it's,
here,
so we kind of
Gene,
try to
climb up this step ladder.
Yeah.
Nobody's spotting you.
Yeah, we always try to kind of give, on those type of situations, especially kind of give them a heads up that it might not be super ideal, but we can always, it's always like, yes, and, it's like, yes, we can do that. But let me also say these things. And sometimes they don't care. They're like, we just want to get everybody together. We're here, and it doesn't have to be super, formal or whatever. So
yeah, it doesn't have to be perfect. Let's keep going. But that's a really good note. What have you seen? I know you have some things you've tried over times. You've expanded your offerings. Before we started recording, you were telling me about digital asset management. What does that look like, and what problem are you solving for folks?
Yeah, so we've been doing a lot of bigger events, and also working with some clients on a long-term repeat basis that they've kind of been like, I think we were talking about sometimes, the issues like finding stuff, and, sometimes you kind of know where, that you have something somewhere. You're like, I know we got a shot of something from here. And now both the software and, the software itself is getting better, that you can manage this stuff. There used to only be like these certain options for companies that were really high end or really small. And now there's a lot more. And since we're doing a lot of work with clients on a repeat basis, we can keyword things, but now there's AI that is smart and can recognize you a lot better too. Like we did something recently for a big company where it was I think it was just their general main conference for all their internal teams. And, they were saying, let's try this out, because they kind of wanted to see how it works. So we identified, you can identify key people where it just was looking at their faces. And so we, the CEO is speaking to open the conference. So we had some nice shots of him, put it into there, and then you can just say, hey, this is a key person, just show me all the photos with this person. And then the software is pretty impressive now that it can find people, like, there was a reception and it's dark in the back, and he's like back there talking to somebody, in the corner, and it would show that photo. And so it's the software and the AI within it for facial recognition is so good that it really helps. But then you just need more data in there. So, we kind of backfilled from some other events we did, and you're showing that if you keywords associated with images and people, you can really find things, so that you can say, oh, when we were in Vegas for that conference that one year, you can just put Vegas and see all the shots, if you don't remember which year it was, because I don't know about you, but for me, a lot of the stuff blends together,
Running together now. Yep.
Yeah. And so
is it smart enough to layer in if you're like, I'm looking for casual shots, or I'm looking for more formal shots, or if you were to keyword those, or
yeah, and that's where, and we've been doing this for a while with on certain level, jobs where that we can have a data manager who's going to kind of add in the keywords. Because if you don't have the keywords, they could still do stuff based on looking for things, visually. But now the data asset management programs are just way more user friendly, and that's where we've been able to kind of set it up, because we kind of use it for ourselves as well. And so, for the clients, it's become very useful, because they need to find people or speakers from a certain thing, or they need to find, especially like you were saying, the keywords is the key. It's kind of like, as long as you have that integrated within the photos, then suddenly you can find all kinds of stuff, and you can, identify and, pull assets much quicker. So
it sounds like the service it includes not just the software, but the implementation by that data manager of identifying the keywords they're going to want to be considering for the program,
Yeah.
or looking at the assets and thinking about what keywords are sort of like coming forward as being
Yeah.
related inside
Right.
the.
And that's where we have to work up front with the client, because there's a little more planning involved, because like, we need to know what is important to them, because there's like most companies have a lot of internal stuff that they call things, and stuff. So it's like, what do you call this, and what's important? Like, how do you want to find things? So it takes a little bit of more upfront work of thinking things out and mapping it kind of.
Sure.
But I think like most
team, is it the piece of software they're talking about on the stage? Is it? Yeah.
Yeah. And then just general, like what words might they use for categories? Because we use stuff like we're talking, how like sometimes in the events world, we call things, but people don't call them that thing, and so they have
main
to be
stage,
like, oh.
that might not be their word for whatever. Anything as simple as that. That's fascinating. Do you think there's a lot of promise for like future demand for that?
I think for a certain level size, like I think even events, groups, them like the agencies and stuff can use it for their own stuff, because we do a lot of work, with the same clients over and over. And I think, they have their own needs, because a lot of times we're shooting like setups and things like that for them. And I know that sometimes they'll even hire us just because the client doesn't need photography or doesn't want it. And they might just hire us just to get some of the setups and things. And that's useful for them, because they can show, oh, this is how this location is. Because some people have, some exclusive with some locations, or they want to show how a place can look, especially some of these big places like Levi Stadium or even Moscone, because like those things can look so different depending on how, how they're produced. And
when
so
you're at that scale, like being able to visualize what that production looks like is really, it's really challenging.
Yeah. And so on the event side, that's useful to show, because I think people can imagine a little bit, but it's easier to show, and you say, this is how, we can set it up like this and that. So yeah, we've noticed it has been something that like we never were trying to sell it necessarily, but we had worked with clients that like bigger clients that they have their own team and they're doing that. And so we were like, okay, well, we would mention that just to other clients, because they're like, how do you find your assets? And, because, if we've done work for them for years, then we have a backlog, and we do keyword some basic stuff into what we're doing for ourselves, so we can find stuff later. And then now that there's options for, ways to implement it at a reasonable price for smaller or even for bigger companies, we've just been like, oh, okay, we can maybe do this if you want. And, Jack's super technical. I'm pretty nerdy that way too. So we've been kind of like, okay, we might as well, because, we evolve. We used to do more kind of photo booth stuff, but the team internally didn't love it. And so we were like, well, if the team doesn't love it, then we don't have to do it, because we don't want to make people do things they don't love. And so we said we can eliminate that part, and we're only doing kind of more kind of fancy integrations that they're just not just like a standard photo booth of just taking pictures and maybe printing or maybe not, or sharing on an iPad, and doing kind of more activation based stuff for anything that we are doing that's photo booth ish. You
mentioned that you also often are called on to do headshot photography at events, which I think is fantastic in either an industry event, a networking event, or like all hands now, where you're gathering your team who have now, fled to the four winds, the four corners of the earth, and are excited because when else are you going to get that shot? When else are you going to?
Yeah, that's been popular. Like we had been doing it pre-pandemic, but the headshot booth is kind of the term. I feel like this, I don't know if there's a standard industry description of it, but that's kind of what we call it, or it's more high volume. And we've been doing that a lot. Like you said, at all hands, a lot of these companies are having their first all hands since the pandemic. So they want to have people, having their, like some shots because a lot of them have their internal systems, or their Slack or whatever, their own kind of internal Facebooks that they want to have everybody, and for LinkedIn. Because sometimes it's kind of surprising when you look at someone up on LinkedIn and they've got like a picture, you're like, you probably want to have something a little, more professional maybe.
Is that also the photo from your dating site? Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And so the headshot booths have been a really good thing for us. We like them. They're pretty fun. We've got the system down pretty well. There's different ways that, we can do it for the clients with like service levels and things like that. And a lot of them want the, like you're saying, if we can have the keywords built in, because the employees need to get their images somehow. So we either have their email or something, and then we can usually pass that back to the teams. So they have that as well. And I like them. They're fun because you get to, they're a little high pace because you're kind of trying to get through a lot of people, but it's pretty fun that, we like to have fun with them. You get to meet a lot of the employees, and they're always well, some of the companies force them to do it, so not everybody's excited, but a lot of times people are kind of excited. And we tell them, if you can have multiple people, because some people actually, there's the people that love it, and then the people that are kind of indifferent. And the people who love it, one of them was like, can I sign up for it again? And I was like, you can. And she's like, I want to wear a different outfit every day. And it's like over the 3 days, she did it 3 times. So
that's great. I love
it.
Yeah, and then you've got the people who are like, I'm doing this because I have to.
Mm-hmm.
The DMV photo.
Yeah.
What do you oh shoot, what was that? What was I just thinking coming out of that? Oh, so when you were telling me when you guys were first getting started that you were smartly joined a bunch of the industry associations, are there ones that you remain engaged with now?
Right now, mostly MPI right now is kind of the main one here, just because like our team is now distributed. So I'm the only owner, kind of main business guy who's in San Francisco, and I do a lot of the traveling jobs and incentives and those type of things when I'm out of town. So so I just don't have as much time to go to things, but so that's kind of the one main membership, because there's a lot, how there's a lot of overlap.
There's ILEA, there's IMAX, there's across the board, and you could start getting quite dispersed, and that would be your full-time job.
And I know also if I'm in one, I want to be kind of participating somewhat at least. And so I figured it's kind of better to just kind of focusing on one. So we're just kind of doing MPI right now here. And I think Jack was in the chapter out where he is in Michigan as well. So
yeah, we also have a core team member who Michigan's the spot now, who moved to Michigan, and now we're engaging in Michigan in fun ways. Are there things that you get out of that membership that extend outside of just being known to other agencies and peers? Do you feel like you get something out of industry forecasts or?
Yeah, that's another thing where, a lot of times at the event I might be shooting, but sometimes I'm not, which is nice because, but yeah, I like the kind of industry, all the stuff within, because I think it's fun to learn about that, because from my side, we see certain things. We're not we don't make, we are part of the event, but there's a lot more going into all the things. And one of the interesting things is that I forget, there's always some interesting topics that that are only for event professionals. And so it's funny because most of the conferences I shoot, either I have no idea what they're the sessions are about because they're so specialized in some industry, but then usually there's some that make sense. But the event ones, I can always I know what they're talking about, or at least the subject. I don't know, I have no expertise necessarily, but I know what the topics are, and just the friendships. We actually have a neighborhood group, because a lot of us live here in the kind of Mission Dolores area, and so we try to get together. It ends up being much less frequently because we're all events people and busy at weird times. So we don't get together as much as we want. But when there's a nice day, we try to just pop out to Dolores Park, because how it is with our schedules. We don't have regular hours. So if it happens to be super warm in the city and beautiful, people might be, hey, you want to just grab drinks for happy hour out at the park or something. So
you're the ones playing hooky in the park, where I'm like, look at these lovely people who have time on their hands, and But I remember that. And I miss it. Now I'm over in the East Bay, and I don't have that same sense of easy, quick, the density of my friends are right here.
Yeah. It's really great because we have quite a lot of us just within I don't know how many blocks, but there's a little core. We got a little group online, and it's kind of a lot of impromptu things, or holiday parties and stuff. But almost never are we all there, because somebody's somewhere always.
Of course, or their heads down finishing a proposal, or tying something up to go on site tomorrow. I get it. Well, I love that you and I have sort of the same, I think maybe just timing wise, our insight into the industry is the same. I was really, my career was really growing in 2001. We both sort of came on this scene at the same time. So it's fun to talk to somebody who's got that same perspective. Throwback to pre-iPhone days, for instance.
Yeah, I know.
It's really great. So I wanted to wrap by asking you if there's somebody in particular that you really admire in the industry that stands out to you.
Yeah, I mean, really, there's so many people, right? Like the event, I love people in the events industry. We have like all kinds of interesting people that are creative. We've got super intense people. We've got people kind of across the board.
Yeah.
And when you had mentioned that earlier, I was trying to think because I was like, I don't want to say any one person because it feels kind of weird because because there's probably someone else that's
You're gonna leave out.
yeah, but I mean, I'll just say I'll say Gary Murakami. He's actually one of our neighborhood folks as well, and he's
Mhm.
always been super welcoming, very friendly. He's always been kind of supportive of me and my business as we've grown, and he also knows his good side, so that's always kind of helpful. He's like, you always get my good side.
Oh, I
Um,
love that.
yeah, and but yeah, and he's also, he's very involved in the industry at a high level too. Like, we're more kind of here locally, but I think he's on some like national boards and things like that. I think I'm pretty sure. And so, he represents kind of our region as well as the industry as a whole really well, and he's a good friend. So I'll say Gary.
It's nice to have that like more holistic vision now. I think as our company's grown, as I'm not in like the boots on the ground quite as often, I think that might be the next place we need to be putting our attention, and just I really appreciate knowing other people that are already doing that and what they get out of it. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a great different perspective. You just gave me another sort of parting thing you could share with our audience, which is there a way to tell what your good side is, Jean, and what is the trick?
Well, so one of the kind of like internal tips that we photographers have is like when you're just looking at someone straight up is usually people part their hair to their good side because they've kind of figured out that side, that's why there's more of that face showing from the parted side. That's kind of a general tip. But that's where with the headshot booths and headshot jobs that we do, and we see lots of people and going through high volume, you can really tell some people actually look good. They're just like mostly can kind of pull it off, but some people it's very dramatic. So when we take the photos, we kind of angle them a little from one side and then the other, and usually you can tell, like if you take a picture slightly angled from each side and let someone else tell you, because we ourselves are the worst judge of looking at ourselves, because most people will focus on what they don't like about themselves, and when they look at a photo, whatever minimizes that thing they'll like the best. So let's say whatever it is you don't like, you'll notice less of it on whatever shot, but that might not actually be the better shot. So if you have a partner or a best friend, have them tell you, because they're going to know much better and they're going to be honest with you about it. So yeah, just take pictures, like take it straight on, take a little bit from one side, take it from the other side, and then show it to your best friend, and let them tell you which side's the best side. So
Trust them even if you don't agree. I'm the person who hates 95% of the photos taken of me, so it doesn't
yeah.
matter what angle it's taken from.
Yep.
So yeah, I always have to have somebody just be like, somebody else tell me. Just
Yeah,
tell me you can't even look.
that's
Yep.
really the best policy, because I like it because sometimes when people are picking and their coworker who knows them comes over and is looking, they're like they're always like, that is definitely, they know, because they can be objective about yourself, and we cannot be ourselves for ourselves, looking at
Yes.
ourselves. So.
Yes. All right. Final thought. Tell me what you love about pinball and why it has captured your heart.
I like pinball for the same reason I like film photography. I think it's like the analog nature of it. It's very analog, right? It's when you play a pinball machine, it's a physical, the ball is flying around, it's doing things in kind of real, it's not a video game, it's not programmed, so things happen that can't happen, that shouldn't happen. The ball hit the glass or jump over your flipper. These are all terrible things sometimes, but it's very random. And I think part of it is just like, it's very zen when you get into a flow and just kind of, because you're basically battling, you're going to lose ultimately, like the ball's going to drain eventually. But while you're playing, you actually, one of the things people don't know is you're allowed to, they say, oh, it's tilting is cheating, but you're supposed to kind of shake the machines. And so you get this physical, element to it as well. Yeah. There's like moves where like a slap save, where you literally slap the machine, normal life, you're not slapping things and shaking things and all that. So not that I'm that aggressive or anything, but it's kind of fun. I'm pointing because I have a machine right there.
Oh, yeah, right there. And you get to
Yeah.
feel the weight of that ball, which I feel like feels so satisfying too.
Yeah. And the longer you survive, because I think anybody who's played it ever, they're always like, it's so hard to keep it alive. So, as you do it, it just it's a good feeling and it's fun. And it's the same thing as the events industry. You have a lot of cool people you meet from all walks of life that are, into this strange little passion. So it's just something that kind of captured me, and I've been super addicted to it. So my free time, I try to travel to compete in tournaments and things, and just got back from one this weekend. So.
Nice. How'd you do? Was that not the
I got 11th in the main division. I won a side tournament, so that was fun. So yeah, it was all good.
That's great. How big is a tournament like that?
That one, I think the main tournament had like 160 people or something, but the smaller local stuff might just be 20 to 50 people or something like that. So yeah, we have a really thriving community here. So very lucky in San Francisco. So. And Bay Area.
It's been a long time since I've had, it hasn't been that long. I'm thinking Alamo Draft House has some, or had some anyway. Yeah.
They do. Yeah. My Flash Gordon machine is in there. So yeah.
All right. I need to go seek it out. Thank you. That's fantastic. Yeah. All right, Jean. Well, I know we will put in the show notes where everybody can find you. Thanks so much to Jean Hwang, co-founder of Orange Photography. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Paige.
Thanks for listening to the Kennedy Events Podcast. Come back next time and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.